Well, now it's time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Dr. Constance, please take it away.
Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. It's just you and I today.
Yes, it is.
It's going to be an enjoyable time.
Vimbai is not around, so it's up to us.
That's right. It's up to you.
And you're involved as well.
That's right.
Okay, let's take it away. Let's look at the stories that are shaping the agenda today. Let's begin with this day newspaper. When we look at this day, and in general, actually, a key theme that runs through all papers this morning is the combined church attack in Eruku, Kwara State, and the school abduction of 25 girls in Kebbi State. This is putting considerable pressure on the federal government to do more on security. The government is therefore making public assurances, for instance, that it is firmly committed to securing the release of the Kebbi schoolgirls. The abductions are also being framed as part of Nigeria's kidnapping, banditry, and terrorism crisis, and also a growing scrutiny over religiously motivated violence, both domestic and international. So this day here leads with the federal government placing the nation on red alert, given the most recent security attacks that I just mentioned, and the president postponing his trip to South Africa. Over in the U.S., the U.S. congressman says it has met with a delegation of the federal government over the Christian genocide claim. And on the window, we have estimated billing hopefully will be a thing of the past in the next 3 to 5 years. That's what this window story is saying. There's 700 billion naira that has been mobilized to implement the metering of the country, according to the Minister of Power. Moving on to Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard reports that President Bola Tinubu has postponed that planned foreign trip to the G20 summit in South Africa and the AU-EU meeting in Luanda, Angola, due to security concerns. The Punch also, let's go to the Punch, has gone with Nnamdi Kanu's case that security is being tightened in the southeast as his fate is decided today. There are other reports that Kanu has asked the court to delay the judgment. Punch also touches on the federal government blaming U.S. designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern for the Kwara and Kebbi attacks. That's interesting. Daily Independent this morning writes about the embattled People's Democratic Party and the Independent National Electoral Commission rejecting the Wike faction. Also here, debt crisis is highlighted as experts say revenue shortfall will deepen the stress, while it reflects on claims by the federal government that genocide tag has emboldened violent groups. Moving on to Leadership newspaper. Leadership has gone with the Minister Nyesom Wike of the FCT declaring that he has the right to revoke and reallocate lands in the capital city, following controversies surrounding land grabbing and also delay by citizens to perfect their titles as well as develop their properties. New Telegraph quotes ICPC boss as saying that Africa loses $50 billion annually to illicit financial flows. And onto the Daily Times, which has gone with the judges singing President Tinubu's praises at a conference, and this is seen as an assault on national dignity by Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, although they have flatly denied doing this. That's been in the news last night. Let's go to the international headlines and begin with Daily Mail. The major theme that runs through papers in the UK is economic pressure and budget worries. Daily Mail asks the question, what percentage of British people think the economy is in great shape? There's a polling that shows very weak public sentiment about the UK economy. This raises pressure on Chancellor Rachel Reeves ahead of the upcoming budget, with newspapers framing it as a make or break moment. Fears of taxation. Let's pull up iNewspaper. Taxation and a hike in council tax, which is a source of worry as well. To the Financial Times, and actually the Daily Telegraph. But Financial Times first, which writes about the Russia-Ukraine war and the U.S. urging Ukraine to accept a deal that will cause it to lose parts of its territory. Daily Telegraph cast that headline this way: cash for land deal, for Ukraine. Generally, there's a major asylum immigration overhaul as a running news in the UK papers. The government is pushing through that very large reform of its asylum policy. There's also plan to remove the statutory duty to provide housing and financial support for some asylum seekers who refuse to work or violate rules. And moving on to Sun newspaper, security defense concern is top today. Several papers are highlighting a foreign surveillance ship allegedly directing lasers at RAF pilots, raising serious national security concerns. Finally, The Guardian leads with Prime Minister Keir Starmer calling on opposition leader Nigel Farage to address racism claims. Returning to this day newspaper now, there the nation on red alert as the president awaits further briefings on kidnapped Kebbi schoolgirls, also on reports on attack on worshippers in Kwara. He has directed the military to deploy to Kwara and police as well. A lot of movement there, isn't it, Yolanda?
Absolutely. Dr. Constance, I wonder if we can just for a moment look at what happened in Kwara State. We were having a side conversation earlier when we were taking the report, and we were speaking about how innocent worshippers of the CAC church were just, having this Thanksgiving service. And ironically, this Thanksgiving service they were having was for the release of people who had just escaped banditry. Can you imagine the irony of that?
Yes.
And then while that is going on, there's a live stream that shows them being attacked.
It was terrible.
It was terrible to watch.
Yes.
I think what was most heartbreaking for me was the fact that there was such old people in the congregation. There were old women who couldn't even run. They couldn't even save their lives. There were children. You could hear them screaming. And from that attack, there was loss of lives and people abducted from that as well.
Yes.
So what is the nation actually coming to? It seems like daily we are being faced ever since Monday when the girls were abducted in Kebbi State.
Also very horrific.
Absolutely. We are now facing this. And to just link the two, we were also speaking about the report where the names of these girls were released and the possible reasons behind it.
Yes.
I believe that one of the points that came up in our discussion was the fact that these are mainly Muslim names. So how does that correlate with everything that is going on now? All these talks from, the US where they're insisting on a Christian genocide, but you and I seem to have butted heads a little bit on that one.
No, not really. It's not about butting heads. One thing does not negate the other.
Absolutely. Two truths can exist at the same time.
There are Christians being persecuted in the north, and they're saying that.
Very true.
And they have documented evidences. There's also terrorist attacks that is killing both Muslims and Christians. We all know that. The Christian persecution is a much longer issue. It didn't start in 2015 when terrorism started in Nigeria. So that's a different issue entirely. And Christians that live in the north, not you and I that live in Lagos and Abuja, cities. People that live there know what they go through. So I think that's their own focus. But let's pull up Vanguard newspaper because there's that report on President Tinubu cancelling the G20 summit to South Africa, because of this. We also know that he has sent the vice president to Kebbi State, who is supposed to give him reports on what's happening there. So the president actually, postponing that South Africa trip, I think it's a total departure from what has happened in the last 2 years. And it is apparent that this genocide tag hanging on Nigeria has jolted the government so much that it is now trying to chart a different path. So the decision to cancel that trip has been welcomed, and it is normal actually, because all over the world when countries are faced with huge challenges, presidents sometimes abort their trip when they are abroad to return. And those that haven't gone at all cancel it outrightly. So this is normal, and it shows genuine concern for the plight of Nigerians at this time. So, but there's also more. What we know is that the government also has been giving out a lot of information about what is going on. You know, the arrest of the Ansaro terrorists, the jail terms that has been handed to some of them. We have the special advisor to the president, or special assistant, you know, sent to Plateau State on a peace mission.
Yes.
We also had the vice president go on a peace mission as well to commiserate with those that were affected. We have ambassadors that will be announced very soon. And a lot that is going on at the same time. Deployment of security officials to Plateau, to Kwara.
Dr. Constance, on what you just mentioned about the president cancelling his visit, I just want to acknowledge the fact that Nigeria is actually facing a very silent war, and slowly but surely the cup seems to be overfilled now and spilling over, because just as I rightly mentioned, from Monday, we have been seeing so much in the news. We can't even cover enough of the stories in our newspaper review because there's just too many of them. And like you said as well, you know, the president positioning himself and, you know, canceling the trip is a very good show that he's prioritizing the needs of the nation. But right now, we need a lot more than that. We need concrete action. Yesterday as well, we spoke about how one of the headlines said the president was depressed. And we were saying depressed is not what we need right now. We need to have a strong backbone. We need to look like, you know, we are really standing up to what the day is demanding. Sorry, you were going to say something.
And you know, that reminds us of what happened in the past when, for instance, when there were a series of attacks on Plateau, Benue. The president did go to Benue, you know, the Yelwata massacre. Over 100 people massacred. He did go to Benue, but he didn't go to Yelwata. And he was heavily criticized for that. And then there was Plateau. And instead of going to Plateau, he did not. Instead, when the APC chairman, Professor Nantewa Yawata, when his mother was buried, the president attended that funeral. And people were furious, saying, you did not go to commiserate with people that were affected. Now you're going for a political event. You know, so that did not go down well. Now, so flip back to now. You know, it's totally different. The president is definitely towing a different path. And let's move to the second story in this day, whether we'll have time to. So the U.S. congressman confirming that, you know, they have met with FG's delegation, the federal government's delegation to Washington, D.C. Of course, there's a lot of pushback by the federal government over that alleged Christian genocide claim. But can we pull up the Punch newspaper and pair it with that story? Secretary to the federal government of the Federation, George Akume, blaming Kwara and Kebbi attacks on the genocide tag on Nigeria, claiming that it has emboldened violent groups. He spoke a lot. You know, it was a very, very long speech. He talked about asylum, Nigerians going abroad to seek for asylum, denigrating the country in the process. He also talked about, you know, trying to explain the terrorism problem in Nigeria and expanding, you know, that conversation to help outsiders understand what is actually going on in Nigeria. He says there's no Christian genocide. That has been the government's stance. He did not specifically talk about the persecution of Christians, but he talked about Boko Haram insurgency and explained that there's a combination of things: illegal mining, kidnapping, ransom, extortion, cattle rustling, territorial control, and illegal levies are all part of what we're dealing with. Having said that, we do know that Boko Haram, you know, as a terrorist group, subscribes to the radical Salafi jihadist ideology. The group regards Western education as forbidden, and it has sought to replace the Nigerian government with an Islamic-style state that will, you know, run based strictly on Sharia law. That's part of the ideology. That's part of what they want, and that's part of the fight. And that is why when people say there is no persecution, it is things like this that make, you know, help people to reach the conclusion that actually there's a lot going on. When we talk about that hearing that is going on in the United States about the designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, there are various groups, clerics, experts, advocates, human rights activists that are there, sharing information, documented evidences of what has been going on in northern Nigeria for so many years. You know, there are cases of Christian girls being, you know, taken and forcibly converted according to them. These are documented evidences. There are cases of people being unable to build their churches within the city and being asked to go outside the city outskirts, for instance, in Borno. There are cases of federal institutions where Christian students cannot build their chapels while the Muslim counterparts can build mosques. There's a lot. We don't have time to go into that, but your quick take on that, and then we'll see one other story.
I mean, so many questions come up from this discussion. When I was looking at some of the footage of, for example, the latest story, that fresh attack in Kwara State, where are all these weapons coming from? Who is supplying these bandits with these weapons? These are sophisticated weapons. You're not talking about, you know, small little handguns. These are actually army-grade weaponry that they are handling. So who is supplying all of that? There's so many questions that are coming up from all of this. It's good to see that this delegation in the U.S. has gone to the U.S. and is speaking up. But one wonders, is it not too late? Is this not something we should have done before? We should have curtailed this before it got this far. Did we have to get to this point to start speaking up and saying this is what is happening in Nigeria and reaching out for help?
There are failures. There have been successive failures, but
no doubt
it is never too late because it's ongoing, so you can begin to address it now, and that's what is going on. Daily Independent, INEC says Wike-backed national chairman Mohammed Abdurrahman is not recognized. And in other reports, PDP Secretariat has been sealed. So what this is about is that the Wike faction had written INEC to say that the Ibadan Convention had been postponed due to logistics reasons. We also saw an advertisement by that faction on national television, you know, telling people not to go to Ibadan. But of course, INEC had replied saying that they only recognize the Iliya Damago faction because that letter that was written to them was not signed by the national chairman Iliya Damago. So that shows that everything that you know the Wike faction has been doing has come to nil. And then that PDP secretariat needed to be sealed up because of, you know, the clash that we saw yesterday. If we had been left open, it probably would have continued with thugs taking over the whole place and taking advantage of the situation.
That was embarrassing. That's such a fall from glory for the PDP to see how things would have de-escalated to that extent yesterday. And, you know, I also wonder, part of the notes that I took down concerning this was the fact that, you know, how did the atmosphere become so charged that way? Is that how it's supposed to go down? I mean, I know that you can create a political scene to put your message across, but yesterday was a little bit over the top. There was tear gas. There was so much going on. And so now to also hear about confirmation that Saturday was not supposed to have held, we already knew that, didn't we? This is something that Wike even spoke about and even pointed jabs at it. So at this point, there's nothing new.
So finally, on the international front, you know, the China-Japan row over Taiwan, you know, and China has now escalated by banning seafood import from Japan. First of all, it started by warning its citizens not to go to Taiwan. Vice versa, the Japanese want their citizens not to go to China, and now, you know, and then it summoned the ambassador, both summoned ambassadors in their countries to answer questions, and now it has gone to another level. Sedai Takaichi, who is the new Prime Minister of Japan, started this by saying that if China attacks Taiwan, that Japan will be forced to use military action to defend itself, because of course it depends on Taiwan for energy supplies and a couple of other things. I don't see her winning this fight, although Japan has the U.S. as a strong ally. You know, outside of the U.S., Japan has the strongest military concentration of the United States.
I'm glad you mentioned that Japan has the U.S. because part of the underlying argument in all of this was Japan as well saying that maybe we don't need the U.S. after all. Maybe we can face our wars by ourselves. And that was a conversation that was going on. But here are the facts that I do know about what is currently going on between Japan and China. China had mobilized their Coast Guard near Japanese waters. And this came after what the Japanese Prime Minister had said, her remarks about,
that they would take military action if Taiwan is
absolutely
attacked. Yes.
Absolutely. Now this caused a lot of mayhem.
Yes.
You spoke about how they've encouraged that tourism should stop. This also affected the stock market as well, and which normally we see does happen when politics gets a bit dirty. Obviously the stock market is shaken up as well. Will this abate anytime soon?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yes,
it doesn't seem like the end is anywhere close by.
It's not the end, definitely not. All right, those were your headlines for today.